Welcome everyone. My name is Carla Abreu and I'm Community and Program Manager at Singularity University, Portugal, working together with Nova Business School of Economics in this initiative. I have the pleasure to be your host for today's webinar, Leadership at the Distance, an initiative that is part of the Role to Play campaign promoted by Nova SPE that aims to help our community to deal with the several challenges that we are facing in the current context. How can we lead our teams at distance? What will be our role as leaders and also as supporters of our tribe in order to face the new normal? Which are the best practices to work when we are not face-to-face with our team? Guided by the latest insights from Neuroscience, Misha Byrne will answer to these questions. Misha Byrne is a social neuroscience and performance expert and also member of Singularity University Portugal faculty. With the background in researching the brain mechanism, he specializes in taking the latest insights from neuroscience and creating the real-world business applications. Finally, some technical information to our attendees. Feel free to use the Q&A area available in the bottom of your screen to ask questions that will be answered in the end of this session. The chat is mainly used to technical issues. And now, to learn more about the topic of this session, I leave you with Misha Byrne.
Thank you, Carla. And hello, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and a privilege to share some reflections at this amazing and challenging time for leaders and teams right around the world. It's not an easy time to be a leader right now, but it's such an important role that many of you are playing for your teams, for your families, and hopefully also for yourselves as well. I want to start with one of those unexpected ways that technology has helped build our understanding of how humans work and what we need to perform. Video games are fascinating to me, even though I don't play them as much as some people do. On a planet that has a population of about 7.6 billion, more than 2.5 billion of us, it turns out, are video gamers. Now, 70% of parents would now in 2020 say that video games play a positive role in their child's development. And we have this picture that video games are for kids. But it turns out that the average gamer is between 30 and 40 years old. Men and women both like to play, about 55 to 45%. And for years now, people who work a hard day and come home tired, often because they've been sitting at a computer, typing and performing tasks, sit down at their own computer and spend another 2 or 3 hours playing online games. And so what we've learned and what we see day by day is that being online doesn't have to be a barrier to being active, motivated, excited, engaged, and performing. And most importantly, as we see with online gaming tournaments and people following each other and all these things, being online doesn't have to be a barrier to feeling connected to other people. You know, coronavirus has pushed so many of us into this online world, connecting with family and friends, you know, sometimes virtual visits in hospitals, but also through our sudden transition into this area of virtual or distant teaming. It's been almost overnight, and it's been with very little thinking for lots of teams. So many organizations, including ones that we support, Nova and Singularity University, so many of these organizations are in the middle of a very significant transition. And in the rush, it's easy to forget that this is a transition that the world has been making for some time. And that is the transition to virtual or distributed teams. Now, this area of how to lead from a distance, that's been an area of passion of mine for some time and for my team. We're a group of psychologists, behavioral economists. I'm a neuroscientist, and we use insights from all of these different fields to help humanize work, to make large organizations better places to work, but also do it for ourselves. Now, we're a distributed team based right around the world. And some of us, it turns out, have been working remotely for over 10 years. And so in the last 5 or 6 weeks, as all of us suddenly found ourselves working from home, and we started talking about how hard it is to motivate ourselves and how hard it is to juggle family and the dog scratching at the door and all these things, those people who've been working remotely said, yes, it is extra effort. It is hard work. to maintain and juggle all those things. But as we talked it through, we realized that it takes extra effort, but it is possible. It is sustainable, which is important. You can actually feel fulfilled working from home, managing your team relationships from home, but it does take extra effort and extra energy. And so today I want to share with you just a little bit, just to scratch the surface on some of the things that you can focus on as a leader to help build a virtual distributed team that can thrive. And I'm going to do that by helping you understand first why virtual teams don't work by accident. And it's because of your brain. I'm going to share with you some of the more hidden needs that every brain has, social needs that good leaders satisfy for their teams, regardless of whether it's face-to-face or online. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how my team, our team, has found ways to satisfy those needs by putting the neuroscience into practice through little team habits. And all of this is so that you can have just a few more tools in your toolbox to support your own people as you go through this really interesting and challenging time. So first, let's talk a little bit about why the virtual environment makes it harder for your brain. And it's because your brain is social. Now, there are lots of different kinds of neuroscience, and I am what you call a social neuroscientist, which means I'm fascinated in what happens in your brain the moment there's somebody else in the room. And what we've learnt over the last 10 or 20 years is that your brain is beautifully adapted to work in teams, to live in tribes. Now, this is great. One of the best things about the human brain is you don't have to be good at everything by yourself. You can rely on other members of the team. And it's this ability to collaborate that's helped us achieve so many of the things that we have. But one of the things it also means is that your brain is wired to take input and data from all of the people around you and use that to help shape, guide, and motivate your own performance. Now, of course, video game designers, if we come back to the start for a moment, they've been doing this for quite a few years now. And in particular, in the last 20 years, they've been working very, very hard to say, how can we create connection? And how can we motivate better performance from game players when they're in an online environment? And there are whole gaming tribes, if you haven't seen them, heard them, or participated in them, who have never met face to face, but who would class each other as their closest friends and their most powerful allies. And when you look at what's going on there, and you don't need to memorize this slide in detail, these are just some of the things that game designers now look at when they're trying to create a relationship online. And I'll give you a quick tip. None of these have anything to do with the actual words that somebody says, the audio channel in the video conference. You know, there are some obvious things that you might guess. Oculesics that's a fancy way of saying, where are your eyes looking? And of course, in video conferencing, we're never looking at each other anymore. We're always either looking down at the screen or off to the corner. There's facial expressions, which are important and which you can sort of see in video conferencing. But then there are all these other things. Small changes in tone of voice, which they call paralanguage. You know, think about how much information you get sitting close to a friend or in a meeting and hearing someone who's loud all of a sudden start to talk soft. Think about the information you get from small gestures and body language. Is someone leaning in or away? Olfactics is interesting. It turns out we all have chemicals that our bodies release called pheromones. This isn't nice to talk about, but there are some studies that show that people who smell like us chemically, we tend to spend more time with in teams and social groups. That's interesting. How does that translate online? All of these are important social cues that we use to feel like we're safe and part of our tribe. And so the estimate is that when you're sitting in an office at a team meeting, tribing, coming together as a group or as a tribe, you're processing at least 2,000 bits of information per second. And you can see it in that picture, right? You can sort of see who's looking at who's happy and who's not, who's had sleep, who's a little confused or frowning, where's the power in the room. This is all the data we rely on to feel like we're safe and part of a tribe. And when you feel like you're safe within your tribe, connected to the other people and like you belong, your brain gives you a really important neurochemical called serotonin. Serotonin is what tells your brain that everything is okay. And when you don't have enough serotonin in your brain, it's associated with clinical depression. This is a really important neurochemical. And in so many ways, it depends on our social environment. And of course, that's what all of us have been relying on until very recently. Now we're relying on this. Now, some of us have got good internet. And so we've got fast broadband and we can see all the videos. Others of us are having to turn our videos off and turn everybody else's videos off so that we can hear what they're saying. But it doesn't matter what situation you're in, we're all missing out on these really important social cues. Now that's one reason it's hard for your brain. The second reason comes down to the technology itself. And this I find really fascinating. Those blue bits in that brain on the left, that's a picture of a brain. Those blue bits on the left are the parts of the brain that do maths and spreadsheets and do all of the visual processing when you're looking at things and seeing patterns. When we're using computers, these are the parts of the brain that we tend to use most, the mechanical parts. It turns out that those parts of your brain compete with the red bits and the pink bits. And those reddy pinky bits are the ones that are to do with empathy, with connection, with understanding people, with feeling what they're feeling and feeling a sense of connectedness in a relationship. And so what's really interesting is as we make the shift to the virtual world and we go through the pain of learning how the technology works and which button do I click and how do we track and all of this adjustment, we're using these blue bits and it's very easy for the blood to flow literally from the pink bits into the blue bits. And what it means is we end up with something that I would call the empathy gap, the online empathy gap. The data is nowhere near as strong and we're using these mechanical computer parts of the brain to process it. And what we can do either unconsciously or by accident is end up with this gap in connection. So that's why it's hard. Now, your brains have social needs. And let's talk a bit about leaders at their best. Because you have a social brain, your brain has particular needs that it has to have satisfied in order for you to feel good and for you to be able to perform. And great leaders are excellent at satisfying these needs. Even if you don't know their technical names, great leaders satisfy these needs for their people, whether they're face-to-face or online. Now, if you're interested, this is a very rich and interesting area. I can give you some references to books and papers after today. One of the books that I've contributed to is about 1,000 pages long. So it's a bit too much detail for a quick webinar. So let's come up and go to a higher level. There are two things that great leaders are able to do. One is get the mechanics right. And at a simple level, this mechanic stuff is, does everyone have what they need to get the work done? Does everyone know what they're supposed to be doing? Are the roles clear? Do we have Zoom or whatever it is in place? Do we know the rules? Now, what's really interesting here is that dividing up the work and setting those clear expectations is important for management, but it's also really important as a leader because the social brain craves something called psychological safety. Google did a big study, a big piece of research about 3 years ago now, looking at their highest performing teams. And what they discovered was that the most important factor in their team's performance was whether the leader could create a sense of psychological safety. And this psychological safety comes when you feel safe within your tribe, like there's stability, like you understand the rules, and that you're able to belong. When you don't have this, and you now know from what I said before, when you don't have this sense of belonging, your serotonin levels drop. And for any of you who've made a sudden shift from being right in the center of a team to all of a sudden being by yourself, possibly in one apartment where you're the only person there, and you find that your energy is just a bit flat, part of it is you've been, for all the right reasons, relying on the tribe to help sustain that level of serotonin. This isn't a curse, you can adjust this, but it doesn't happen by accident. So face to face, how do we feel safe within the tribe? It's all about formal team meetings and one-on-ones with your manager, sure, but it's also about watching each other, asking each other, interacting with the tribe. Did you ever wonder, am I allowed to print in color? Why don't I try printing a few pages and I'll see how people respond when I put it down on their desk. They won't say anything, but I'll be able to tell from their face whether or not that was a good or a bad thing to do. These micro expressions and micro feedback and all of these dynamics are very hard to translate into the digital environment. And so your task as a leader is to be very explicit and clear about what? About everything. The golden rule in terms of team mechanics is too much is still probably not enough. Clarifying role expectations, how a role is going to fit together. What does it look like to be a good team player? What's good behavior look like online? How do we communicate? How fast? How often? All these sorts of things. These are all really critical to make as clear as you possibly can through one-on-one conversations, through team conversations, reminders at the start of meetings. The faster you can create this psychological safety, the better. So when you get team mechanics right, people feel safe and valued. And this is really, really important. But unfortunately, that's not enough. Once you've got the mechanics right, you also need to be paying attention to the other set of social needs, which are to do with the team dynamics. Because in addition to feeling safe and valued and stable, we do actually have a need to feel happy and excited and to be able to express, to see how we're going, to express when you're happy, express when you're sad, go through life together. We have a social need to feel connected and supported. And we have this need to feel like we're heading towards a good future. Now again, in face-to-face environments, where does this happen? You might be able to think back to the last time you were in the office and with the team. It doesn't happen in the formal meetings so much as in the coffee chats and the corridor conversations. Little gestures that we do for each other when you see someone's tired or busy. It's about looking out for the person, not just the task. Now, how can you translate that into the virtual online world? Getting it right is critical because without it, the mechanics are there, but people feel like the team has no soul, like we're there as bits in the machine and not as people. Now, there's no golden set of examples of how you do this, but here's a few that our team do. Once we realized we weren't going to be able to do corridor conversations and coffee chats, we started virtual drinks. Once a week, half an hour. The first question is, what are you drinking today? And from there we chat and we laugh and people share stories about what's going on. Sometimes people are happy, sometimes we're responding to the news recently about COVID, whatever it is. Tash is in our team. She was supposed to be going on a week's holiday to an island to sit in the sun. And once COVID came, she wasn't able to do that. And that was really tough for her. The team recorded little 30-second videos, each person with a bit of personality. Someone sang the song that was number one the year she was born. Somebody put a pirate's hat on. Someone sent her a cocktail. It's these little gestures that don't have to cost money, but that say as a team we're interested in more than just the performance. We're actually interested in the people. And one-on-one, how are you going conversations. This is a really interesting piece of neuroscience. It has to do with masking. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you have a really strong reaction to something, say in a meeting, but it wouldn't be polite to express it. And so you mask and try and look very calm and friendly and polite. And whatever you do, don't show that you're angry or upset or stressed or whatever it is. Now, what's interesting is when you're masking, your frontal lobe has to stop thinking about the problems in the work and start thinking about controlling your behavior. And so you lose up to somewhere between 50 and even sometimes 70 or 80% of your mental abilities. 80%. Now, in face-to-face teams, learning to manage this and express is really important. Online, it's even more important because it's so much easier to mask. If you think about it, if I'm feeling terrible, if I'm having a really hard day and struggling to get out of bed and we start our team meeting, how are you, Mish? Fine. And then someone else starts talking, and as the camera moves on, I quietly turn my video off and go and feel terrible in the corner, and no one ever really knows. This is a real challenge for all of us because this masking is still having the impact on our performance. And at a really genuine human level, we don't want people struggling and suffering in silence. So for our team, we have a simple rule, which is it's okay to ask how you're going. In fact, we do it all the time. And it's okay to say how you're feeling. And it's not unprofessional. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a critical part of how we support each other to perform. Your role as a leader in setting that is absolutely essential. So virtual drinks can be fun. There are lots of other ways. I've seen teams playing games online, having just an open Zoom chat as they're talking so that they can joke and share memes and all the rest. But the overall theme in this dynamic space is supporting humans as humans and shifting from crisis and from the work to creativity, or from just surviving online to thriving online. Now that's a very, very high level overview of some of the rich insights that neuroscience gives into what humans need to perform. Neuropower is the book, but you can see that there are lots of these needs. This is something that it takes 2 hours for leaders in a masterclass to sort of get their heads around the first time, and then a lifetime to master. And people come back to me years later and say, I'm still thinking and learning more about how I can do one or more of these needs. But how do you put it into action? Because a 1,000-page book is fantastic, but we don't want you to have to read it before you can get started. The good news is you can get started very quickly. This is how we do it. And again, it's not the only way, it's just one way. A good week for a virtual team has a great beginning, a good middle, and a good end. So for our team, the morning check-in on Monday is a really important time. Lots of teams do check-ins and we talk about the work that needs to be done and who's going to help and all that stuff. But we also take time to check in as a person, to hear how you're feeling as you're entering the week, what came up over the weekend, and are you starting feeling energized and excited, or are you starting feeling a bit tired? What's critical is that we start the week as a team. We finish the week with our last hurrah, and this is a chance to celebrate successes and finish the week. Because part of managing your energy in a virtual team is knowing when to stop and when to call an end to the day and an end to the week so you can switch off. And if you can't drive home and leave the office, you need to mentally leave the office with the team. And in the middle, in amongst all the work to be done, and there are lots of meetings that I'm not showing you in my diary, there are things like a virtual team drinks, a team session where we're looking at how we're going and how we're responding to things like COVID, and then a personal development workshop where we connect with our wider network of over 50 people and we spend time learning and applying and developing ourselves so that we can all cope better. So the message there is it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It's about creating time and space for your team to have conversations that they might not be having anyway. And so looking ahead then to what we can expect from the coming weeks. I mean, none of us know when we're going to come out of lockdown, but one of the things that's pretty clear to lots of us by now, I think, is that things probably aren't going to be the way they were before we started. The future that's been coming for quite a while now is going to be with us stronger than ever before, which is hybrid teams, local and virtual. And so that means as a leader, you need to know how to support people to have these needs met, whether they're face-to-face, online, sometimes mixing between the two. The second one, which I'm really excited about, is the uplifting capability that everybody's going through. Because it means as we all get comfortable with the technology, we're going to become enabled by the technology rather than focused on it. And you can champion that. Help make sure your team know how to use the technology, support people who don't know how, but keep coming back to focusing on the conversation and the connection rather than the tech. And then the third piece is that the future is going to be co-created. We've all been thrown into uncertain times and we're all having to learn and change almost from the same baseline very quickly. And that's a fantastic thing because it means as a leader, you're not expected to have the answer. And I can imagine that lots of you on the line at the moment feel a huge responsibility to your people, to your families, to your teams. My final thought or message would be, rather than going with the answer, go with the question. What was the best thing that we had as a team when we were face to face? And how can we bring that into our online world? And I'm pretty confident that you'll be amazed and blown away by the creativity and the passion that's there in your teams. And so with that, don't forget to have some fun along the way. And I'm looking forward to hearing and answering some of your questions.
Thank you, Misha, for the amazing presentation. As usual, lots of tips that for sure our attendees will help. We will now check the Q&A. We have some questions. The first question is what mechanism can allow neuroscience to contribute for development of a team?
Yeah, it's a great opening question. I mean, I think of all the things that I've covered, I think it would be that real focus on not assuming that people are on the same page. Neuroscience, social neuroscience's big contribution is to say we have this social brain that has these social needs, but in the online environment, we don't get enough of the data to just go along and hope for the best. So even the most empathic amongst us are learning to reset how we do that. But the good news is, and the message of hope from neuroscience as well, is that your brain is actually quite good at learning. Neuroplasticity tells us that it's not fixed, so you can learn new skills, and even though it feels hard at the moment, with support from the team and some collaborating together, you'll actually get there faster than you think.
Well, and we have another question, and this makes the link with some of the tips that you have gave. When we have teams working in different locations around the world, how can we manage this? Because you have people in Australia, for example, you are in Australia right now, we are in Portugal. So how can we manage this all environment to help?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've talked about, the mindset that you need, which is the open, being clear as a leader. The other piece to set with your team is that there's no such thing as a dumb question, particularly in a virtual environment. One of the things that we've adopted for ourselves and recommended for other teams is don't feel like it's your, how would I say this? It's a two-way responsibility, if that makes sense. If I've got information that I think is going to be important for other people to know, it's fine for me to create a little, we use Google Chat, so create a little chat with all the people I think should be involved. And share it to them, or send them an email, but preferably not email, more a chat room. Equally, if someone else thinks that there's another person who should be added in, that's fine to add them. If it turns out we've missed someone out, we know that that's not on purpose because we're trying to exclude them, and it's fine for someone to ask to join a chat and be involved. It's this idea that information should be flowing as freely as it can, and rather than trying to plan it and get into the structure of, you're allowed and this, what you do is say, we just want information to be as available as it can, as quickly as it can. So ask, tell, and if at any stage someone feels overwhelmed, they can always say, please guys, just leave me alone as I focus. And if anyone feels left out, they can ask, put their hand up and try and be more involved. So it's this idea of encouraging a culture of information sharing. And the technology helps with that.
One final question, because we are already on our time. It's a very interesting question. Are leaders born or created, especially in this occasion, in this moment that we are living now?
What a wonderful question, Nick. It's honestly, I think the answer is both. There are certainly some people whose natural style copes with stress and uncertainty better than others. But my really strong message would be that leadership is absolutely something that can be learnt. And in particular, it's because great leadership is not actually about the leader. It's about how well the leader can support the team. This is the big shift. It's not about you being a hero and standing up and telling people it's all going to be fine if you don't feel like it's going to be fine. It's about creating a space where the team can have the right discussions and the right support. And if you can show as a leader that you genuinely care and that you genuinely want the team to be succeeding, that team will forgive you any of your learning obstacles as you find your way along. And there's a lot that you can do with a genuine apology and I'll do better next time. So I would say that they're created.
Okay. So thank you so much, Misha, for sharing all this knowledge with us and for answering these questions, and especially for being awake at 3 a.m. in the morning from Brisbane in Australia. And also, I also would like to say thank you to our attendees. And we'd like to remind that this is part of the Role to Play campaign promoted by Nova SBE. available at roll2play.novspe.pt, where you can find all the sessions that have been recorded. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget that tomorrow we will have a new session at 6 p.m., another webinar with Roger Delves that will be talking about building leadership skills for an uncertain tomorrow. Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow.